everybody. Welcome to the all members Thursday, December 15th, 2022 general meeting of the Poverty and Homelessness Board. My name is Chris McAllister and I'm the chair currently. I serve in the Lives Experience seat. I would like to do a quick roll call just to make sure that our voting members are here and we have quorum. Would you be willing to do that?
Commissioner Farr.
Present, thank you.
Mayor Van Gordon. Mayor Venice. Councillor Fleck.
Here.
Sheriff Harold.
Present.
Brittany Quick-Warner.
Here.
Donna Butera.
Here.
Dr. Foster.
Here.
Sean Murphy. Matthias Smith.
Here.
Susan Lopez. Julie Wiesman.
Here.
Jacob Fox.
I'm here.
Dave Haviland. Cindy Perry.
Here.
Sheila Wegner.
Here.
Foster Martinez.
Here.
Debbie Farr.
Is it a CAG meeting?
Catherine Ryan.
Here.
And we do have majority.
Awesome. Thank you everybody for being here to our first in-person meeting in approximately 2 years. I'd like to start off this meeting by acknowledging that we are on Kalapuya land and that we do the work here by the spirit of which everybody is included and no one is forgotten. Our peoples collectively share this land moving forward, and we want to make sure that we are ever remembering of the trials and tribulations that have happened for the past peoples, and that we move forward in the spirit of reconciliation and support. With that in mind, I'd like to invite people to do public comment. Do we have any people in the queue for public comment? Do we have someone monitoring the chat?
I am monitoring the chat, and also I just pulled up the agendas. Sorry.
I know traditionally we have done this in the past. In the last couple meetings, we've tried to switch it up because some people were not able to attend all the way through the meeting. If there is feedback afterwards about what this should happen, please feel free to reach out to staff or myself. So do we have anybody in the queue? Robin? Awesome. So we have Robin and Katie. Robin, I'd like to invite you to present.
Good afternoon. How much time do I have?
Approximately 3 minutes.
Okay, wonderful. Good afternoon. My name is Robin Matsumoto, and I am the lead street outreach specialist at HIV Alliance on the Health Focused Street Outreach team. I'm here today to provide public comment regarding the eviction of the residents from Guest House in Springfield that happened yesterday evening. Yesterday at 11 a.m., my manager and I received an email from the county telling us that people residing at the Guest House in Springfield were given until Thursday at 5 p.m. to move and asked if we could provide medical support and outreach. We informed them that we would be there at 2 p.m. Wednesday with our medical team. At 1:15 p.m., I received a call from my manager stating that the residents were to move by 5 p.m. that day. She informed me that police, fire department, and EMS would be on site. When we arrived at 2 p.m., there was only one other service provider present. The other service provider informed us that they were only given 12 vouchers, and they were told another service provider had another 12 vouchers. Our program did not receive any vouchers, and no word was given as to who the other service provider was with vouchers. We collaborated with this service provider, the fire marshal, and a representative from the city of Springfield to formulate a plan to help the residents. We were told that the police were to knock on doors, inform residents that they needed to start packing, and then we would be able to walk through and assist people with their plans for shelter and transportation. Unfortunately, this was not the case. We stood outside and watched as dozens of residents came down, confused and scared. We helped write down names and contact information of the residents, hoping to help place them into shelter. Multiple households had young children, a few residents were pregnant, and many were disabled or medically fragile. By the time we were allowed to enter the hotel, the police had already started ripping doors from their hinges using sledgehammers, crowbars, and axes. People were taking what little they had and leaving traumatized, scared, with no place to go on the coldest night of the season thus far. My team and I were on site from 2 p.m. until 8:30 p.m., helping the other service provider find individuals who could be placed in a hotel and trying to coordinate transportation to Egan Warming Shelter, which, as we all know, is inundated with people seeking respite and severely lacking in volunteers. The lack of communication and planning for this mass eviction is not only inhumane, it is unprofessional. This was an opportunity to truly help individuals be placed into appropriate housing, but instead it became a violent eviction process that have left many citizens traumatized and unsheltered. I wish I could say that this is the first time something like this has happened, but it is not. I have unfortunately been present to bear witness to a multitude of violent evictions since starting this job over a year ago, all of which were conducted with poor communication, very little notice to residents or service providers, and broken agreements. Something has to change. We as service providers are relied upon by city, county, state, and federal governments to help people in need, but how can we continue to do so when there is a severe lack of basic professionalism? How can we continue to help our most vulnerable while enabling violence and poor planning? We need better communication, collaboration, and forethought. We need affordable housing, low barrier services, and empathy. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Katie?
Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
Doing good.
Awesome. So, Robin did a wonderful job, and I didn't really prepare a speech like they did. They did amazing. Good job, Robin. I mostly just wanted to echo their sentiments and just express how incredibly disappointed I am in my cities and counties leaders today. The way this was handled was truly, truly disgusting. The complete lack of empathy for these humans by government officials, by SPD, by county, by people from the fire department. It was truly sickening. And my father was a police officer. I grew up in that community, and to watch all of these cops behave in this way, I cannot describe how disturbed I am. I cannot describe how upset I am, and I was seeing people's doors being ripped off hinges, and cops just laughing, just this violent disrespect for humans who are just trying to be safe. It's the coldest week of the year, and these people are trying to keep their children safe. They're trying to keep themselves safe. There were disabled people there. It was just truly horrifying what we witnessed yesterday. And for all of the grief and sadness and disgust I feel, I can't imagine how these people experiencing it felt. And I just really hope that the powers that be really look at this situation that happened and dig deep and really think about how we can avoid a situation like this happening again. And as far as the police departments involved go and the first responders there, shame on them for the way they behaved. Absolutely shame on them. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Katie, for your testimony. Are there any other people in the queue for public comment? Hearing none, I would just like to say that I see and hear the people who experienced that item at the guest house yesterday, and we will be talking further about that later on in the meeting. And I really encourage everybody who is a provider around this table to learn more about what happened at the guest house yesterday and how we can move forward as a community to help serve. So I want to acknowledge that I was one of the people on the ground that carried forward, and HIV Alliance and McKinney-Vento, Springfield Public Schools were the only service providers that we saw out there. And so I would like to acknowledge the city of Springfield for coming forward with the vouchers to help in the last night. And I would just like to say that with HIV Alliance's help, there were 30 adults, 15 children, 6 dogs, 3 birds, and 3 cats temporarily for 3 to 7 days given sanctuary. So we need to find out how we help those folks. A lot of them have vouchers, a lot of them are in our community, and we need to support our workers in the field who are being the first responders. That is my remonstrance. Is there any other? Brittany, then.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a process question. Is there an opportunity on the agenda for us to discuss, ask questions, or is this the time?
I would like to grant the ability to do a remonstrance towards this.
Okay, and I guess I'm not even sure who I'm asking this to, but who was, I mean, who are the powers that be? Who are the responsible party that we can work with, I guess, for future coordination? To me, like we gotta coordinate these types of activities and communicate better and ensure, I assume that like people got different information going into that situation and that's why they react differently. And so how do we, I don't know if that is our authority as this board, but whose authority is that, so we can make sure to respond to the folks who are concerned?
And I guess I wonder if there's anyone representing the city of Springfield that might be on the call that would like to speak.
Mayor Van Gordon is here, but I think staff may be more appropriate if staff is online.
Yeah, I'm here and I got here late. So if somebody could give me the rundown, if there's, anything sort of more specific. Without the right staff here, we can't get into it.
I could just speak real brief, Mayor Van Gordon, and welcome. Yesterday, the guest house was evacuated due to condemnation by the fire marshal. There was originally thought to be a 48-hour window. It turned out to be a 5-hour window. And so a lot of people were in a previous program that got abandoned. Management for that program disappeared for 3 months. And so there were about 40 units occupied legally and possibly upwards of 20 that were not in compliance with the previous arrangements. And so people found a safe spot, and then it was told that it had to be condemned, and not only did it have to be condemned, it had to be condemned immediately. And so fire marshal oversaw the boarding up and removal of places, and they went in and thermoscanned all of the rooms to figure out if there's anybody left. And then
right. I know, I know what happened at the guest house yesterday. I heard half the conversation, and I didn't want to assume what the public testimony that I didn't hear was about. I can go back, I can try to track down some of the staff folks if people want to ask some more pertinent questions. Right now, what I would do is sort of refer you to, we did issue a public statement about it, about kind of running down the side of events. I've heard stuff, in the public testimony I did hear that I would obviously have some questions about, but really the issue is the safety of everybody involved, right? And so I know it went up on Facebook probably maybe 15 minutes ago. There's a long description of a longer press release about what happened, the timing, the sort of why behind it. And so I assume it's hitting out of their social media here shortly.
Yes, sir. And I would just like to say the city of Springfield, Aaron Fifield, Neil Dadati, and Sandy Belson helped make the rooms happen for the people and help organize, even though it was not their call. The city of Springfield could not do any more at that point after it became a public health condemnation. And so
it is a tragic situation. Obviously, there's a lot of people that are working to find those folks safe places to transition to.
You're through, Vice Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing I'm going to add, Mayor Van Gordon, and for everybody, is that the city of Springfield stepped forward with $33,000 to provide vouchers for the people who are who are leaving the facility. Lane County Health and Human Services came forward with $10,000, and I'm going to throw this to you, Chair. That leaves so Lane County has already provided $10,000, and which leaves us a little bit short of what Springfield provided. We can talk about that a little bit more as we go through the meeting, what we can do and what you could ask maybe the county to do. But I have a quick question. Katie talked about she was disappointed with the city of Springfield and Lane County officials. What Lane County officials were involved in this?
So I can say from my purview that we were the entity that asked HIV Alliance to be there on site. Incredibly grateful to their staff, particularly spending very long hours, an incredibly challenging and frustrating situation for everyone involved. It certainly, with more time, there could have been more resources at the ready, both for HIV Alliance as well as for other agencies. The greatest challenge really was just that pullback of the condemnation, and that there just wasn't time to be able to coordinate, additional resources and even to pull all the providers together to have a conversation, which is happening today to further coordinate the needs and next steps for the residents that are in the motel. And so to my knowledge, that is the extent of Lane County's efforts, certainly not involved with the condemning of the property or certainly the property itself.
And, nobody's trying to pass the buck as to who did this, who did that, but we're in a situation right now where people need a place to stay for this week, next week, and beyond that. And, I'll look at you directly, Chair. I'm here from Lane County. I'm representing Lane County to this board. I'm a voting member. But if you have an ask for Lane County today, forward it to me and we'll see what we can do. If you have a personal ask that Lane County can step in and do something different, whether it be, well, you be the judge on that.
Sure. I would like to reiterate that we do have a lot of opportunities to move forward and take advantage of this. And so I'd like to put out an ask to the county directly. Can we make it $23,000 ask to support the people moving forward to match what Springfield has been able to do?
So 23 in addition to the 10,000 we've given, which would make the counties.
It would make it equal.
I will forward that today from the Poverty and Homelessness Board to administration in Lane County. And while I don't have a 100% guarantee, if it doesn't happen by the end of this day, throw pies in my face,
I'd also just like to amend that ask and say if we have any folks as a member of this body or through the greater situation, we need to have grief counselors, relief counselors for the people who just went through this very traumatic spot. And we also need to reach out and make sure that our people who are in the field are also being taken care of. And so if there's ways for other groups or ways to mobilize under the public health or behavioral health umbrella, please let us know. Is there other?
Yeah, I guess my follow-up comment on all of this, I think obviously dealing with the situation at hand, which is getting these individuals housed and vouchers and whatever that takes. But I guess I want to make sure it's not lost that we have an opportunity to acknowledge what happened and figure out how to get to the bottom of like the communication mishap and to return sort of actions back to the individuals who are impacted to say, here's what happened, here's where the breakdown was, here's where we went wrong, here's what we're going to do next time. That like we can't like just let things like that keep happening and expect the public and our service providers and our homeless individuals to trust that whoever the buck stops at, which I think I'm still unclear with, is actually doing right by the community. So that would be my ask is like, okay, we know that something went wrong here. We have to deal with the individuals who are in need right now, but then let's not pass up an opportunity to identify what went wrong so we can actually respond to the public and to the folks who are obviously really traumatized by it. So
seems like getting a clear intended timeline on what people thought they had and then what the actual timeline and how that shifted would be a good idea, and like how that timeline shifted. Yeah.
Well, Chris,
Yes.
the assistant city manager's coming in about 10 minutes to let folks ask some more technical, probably some more technical questions and timeline questions that I wouldn't have, the ability to ask. I would just ask two things, right? This is a complex situation that folks have been working on for a long time, and and I appreciate the county sort of stepping up with additional resources. This thing is going to keep being worked for the next week or so. So I think maybe the question might be, what else are the other gaps that we still have, right? Because it's not, these things happen quickly, and sometimes things get stood up over the next couple of weeks about what's going to actually happen, right? So I think my ask would be a broader one of this group is just to maybe, let's just ask where the gaps still are as of today, right? Like, what do we still have to solve for? And then frame up, what do we do around that?
Are there any other, thank you, Mayor, and we'll invite Neil to come in and chat in a little bit. Is there any other remonstrance or any other thoughts before we move on to our next item? I want to make sure our public comment feels heard. Yes.
The Oregon Department of Human Services may be able to send staff out there to assist with any benefits that may be affected or determine whether or not SNAP benefits could be impacted as it was an emergency. I don't know who we would contact to arrange that.
We'll ask staff to maybe help follow up on that. Thank you.
3 comments in the chat. I just didn't know if someone was looking.
Oh, sorry, this is confusing, but what we're seeing up here is the computer over here. And I'm sharing my screen over here, and I'm keeping it. I just can't open it on that.
Fair enough, thank you. Rosie, you would like to share a comment?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm Rosie with Services. My question is going to piggyback to her question. If there are DHS recipients, who's the case manager for this? They weren't there to support them. One, and why do we have to traumatize people when we are helping?
Could you speak
Yeah.
directly into the mic?
Well, actually, don't push the button.
Oh, yeah, I'm
It's
sorry.
already
Oh,
on.
you're, yeah. No need to, my fault. I misinstructed to begin with. Leave the button alone.
Okay.
It's on.
okay.
There you go.
So
Yeah.
who's the families that, who's the DHS case managers for these families that we had, if it wasn't for HIV, you know, I just wanted to know, if there are DHS recipients, how come they weren't there to provide those vouchers? And I know that housing is very, very difficult. My concern is because we have 6 children, 30 adults, and there's other agencies that hold Section 8 vouchers. How come they weren't offered before they got to this? That could have been prevented. What's the procedures and the protocols for an evacuation from the fire department? We need that manual. We need to find out and where was that law broken while doing this evacuation from that building? That's the number one.
We've-
And I'm also curious if there's one entity that holds a roster of who was evacuated at this point and like who actually got vouchers and they're housed for a certain amount of time. And if there are remaining individuals just kind of out there. So just like compiling that.
I can just say there are multiple lists because different people came at different times and some people were gone before HIV Alliance and CIF were allowed on site. That said, we will happily try and follow up. And again, this is a perfect storm of issues, and there's not any one fix on here. And it's not everybody in DHS, not everybody at Looking Glass. It's like these are people who it has to have a woven support. And so I will personally help follow up with any other further questions on this matter. Are we okay with moving? Oh, yes.
Just ever so quickly, what I will follow up on, I've already sent the request for the extra $23,000 through to the administrator and to HHS Director Eve Gray. So we'll wait for a response on that. And Rosie, toward you, you asked the great question. I've written that down and I'll look to see how we can come up with more direct answers as to what protocol was broken, if and or what laws were broken as we move forward with the action that took place. I think Mayor Van Gordon said that the city manager of Springfield is going to be available maybe to answer some questions, maybe to shed a little bit of light on that. But that being said, as your liaison to the Board of County Commissioners, this is what I will carry forward from this meeting. What an appropriate time for the Poverty and Homelessness Board to come back together. I mean, you know, for a chance to demonstrate that this is a board that can ask for and expect action.
Thank you. And do we need to do a formal motion, or is just simply speaking to the liaison, Matt?
I don't need a motion as long as people around the table agree with the chair's recommendation.
If we need to formalize at any point, we can bring this back. So thank you, Commissioner, for your work, and thank you very much to the public for your comments on this. Your presence, your eyes matter. With that in mind, I'd like to move forward and see if we can follow up on the consent agenda and budget dashboard. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Any opposed? Sorry, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Signify by saying nay. Hearing none, consent calendar is passed. Thank you. So let's invite Ms. Lynn Oliver to do a deep dive into financials.
Harley, is Lynn on? Oh, yes.
It is.
Lynn, we see your screens.
Hi, sorry, I'm just trying to get it together here. Taking just a second.
So I will share that Lynn Oliver is our senior management analyst at HSD. Lynn has been with us for over a decade and is incredible. And really knows our finances inside and out, and is very skilled at using them to the very best of their ability, particularly at weaving the dollars together to be able to meet the needs in our community. So Lynn, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thanks, Kate. I appreciate that. So as Kate said, I am a senior management analyst with the Human Services Division, and I am here today at Kate's request to go over some of the highlights and attempt to answer any of the questions that you have regarding the financials. The November financials that you can see here on my screen should be on page 14 of your electronic packet. I believe you have both September and November, but I'll just be reviewing the November financials.
And I'll share, in my packet, it's page 15. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. The financial report is basically a simple revenue and expense report. The financial data that is included in that report is a roll-up of the entire Human Services Division of Lane County Health and Human Services Department. The report shows a year-to-date actual compared to budget. We do have an opportunity to update the budget 4 times a year in a supplemental budget process. The current budget that you see in November is based on supplemental number 1. So we are kind of far along in this budget. The supplemental number 2 should appear in the January meeting for the December financials. So for November, we are at 41.92% of our fiscal year. And for November, the revenue is at 18.82% of budget, and the expenses are, I believe, 25.99% of the budget. So they should be roughly around the same at 41%. As Kate explained in prior meetings, the Human Services Division funding is with very few exceptions, and those exceptions are exceptional, but with very few exceptions, the funding is on a cost reimbursement basis. So there will always be this lag in the amount of revenue versus the total expenditures until the end of the fiscal year. So the revenue accounts, they're somewhat self-explanatory, but there are some accounts that I would like to bring to your attention. At the top of the revenue, there is account 451301, which is FEMA. Currently, there is 0 budgeted there. You should see a line item increasing that budget amount significantly in supplemental number 2. We had anticipated the receipt of FEMA COVID disaster funding within fiscal year 22. That didn't come through in time, so you will see that partial in fiscal year 23. The current COVID FEMA outstanding accounts receivable from fiscal year it's actually November of 20, but fiscal year 21 through October of 22 totals 5.4 million. We do anticipate receiving the first bit of that funding in the spring of 23. So accounts 455, 120, and 160 here. Those are the City of Eugene and the City of Springfield contributions to the Intergovernmental Human Services Funding Pool. Those line items also include the CDBG Human Services allocations from both jurisdictions and Navigation Center contributions from the City of Eugene. Lane County's contribution to the Human Services Fund, as well as funding to support other parts of the division, can be found in the 498, 510, and 515 transfers from Lane County General Fund. The account 498900 interfund transfer is not additional revenue, but revenue that is moving around within the division and is offset by the same interfund transfer in expenses. That is our indirect allocations. On expense side, some costs which might be of interest to you would be agency payments. Those are contracted dollars to subrecipient social service agencies. Right above and below that are client support fund, on-the-job training services, support services. All of those are payments that Lane County Human Services makes on behalf of program participants. A lot of that is like the LIHEAP program, outreach supplies, rental payments, and assistance for underemployed and unemployed workforce program participants. Account 512366, the real estate space rentals, which you might notice has a very large variance from the budget. This line item includes primarily the payments to 2 motels that were used for COVID shelters. We did anticipate the shelter project ending a bit earlier than it did, so the budget will catch up with reality in supplemental number 2, and there will be another adjustment in supplemental number 3. Our division indirects are located in 512554 county indirect charges. 512556 department support is the Health and Human Services Quality and Compliance Division, which is funded through an indirect. And 532112, a transfer to special revenue fund, is the Department of Health and Human Services indirect. So those 3 accounts, as well as the actual costs to administer HSD division, combined total the 2.6 million, which is shown in that interfund transfer that I mentioned is offset by revenue. The indirects are roughly 4% of the total budget, less the reserves. And then lastly, the operational contingency in, or the reserves in the 99 series is, the actual reserve is we have 1 million, which is Health and Human Services reserve that was placed in our fund about 4 or 5 years ago for cash flow purposes. The true assessable reserve, the traditional reserve for the Human Services Division, is 468,000, which is significantly low for a budget of this size. Also included in the reserves are funds that are the reason that this is not 1.4 million is that there are reserves that are designated for particular projects. There's vacancy variance, there's some navigation center funding from the state of Oregon, some veteran services has some operational reserves that are in those line items too. So that's kind of the financial statement in a nutshell, and I know you may have some questions, so I'll open it up for questions.
Members of the board, is there anybody who'd like to ask Lynn a question? Brittany?
Yeah, I'm curious about the miscellaneous payments for $1 million. Just curious what kind of falls in that for this budget. Yeah, sorry, 512911.
I would need to get back to you if I'm inaccurate about this, because there are a lot of line items and moving parts. We do have a rental assistance program for COVID funding, and we are offering advances to our providers to be able to cover some cash flow. And so we use that line item. I don't know if it's the full 1 million, but we do use that line item as an expense, and when they pay back the advance, it also applies to that line item as a contra expense.
Thanks.
But I will let you know if there's something else in there besides that.
Hi, Lynn, this is Lucy Venice speaking, and first of all, I really want to thank you because I have asked for some kind of explanation of these financials for years, and it was always dizzying to me, and now you have shed some light for me, and so I'm really grateful. And so I have a very simple question, which is that the pie chart on the facing page, on the previous page, on page 14, is that reflecting the data that's on this page 15?
So
are you referring to this?
it's the pie chart that I had created with the different program areas.
So the dashboard that Kate is sharing with you, she has selected individual accounts or department IDs to focus on. And so this is also included in that packet. So this is the full Human Services Division actuals year-to-date November. And I went and highlighted down here the account or the department IDs that Kate is highlighting in your financial dashboard that you see on a monthly basis. So no, it does not match the entire division, because I'm looking at the entire division in the financial statement that you receive. The kind of community action funding is basically housing and housing and community action through the data and HMIS here. And so there's corresponding department IDs that are included in that.
And so the chart the pie chart that you're looking at is specifically just for the homelessness programs and the community action programs that are actually contracted out to the community. And so it's a subset of what Lynn is sharing, which is of the entire division, much more narrow. But what I felt like to be more indicative of the focus of the PHB.
Thank you.
Commissioner Farr,
Ever so briefly, and I will defer to Co-Vice Chair Quick Warner. What Kate just said, the pie chart really is more or less what this board is focused on, the type of work that this board. The rest of it, if you look at it, it's a $55 million budget, or $55 million for the entire division. That's a lot of money, and not all of that is specifically pertinent to the work of this board. And I think, Mayor Venice, what you've been asking for is what does this board do? And I think Kate boiled it down with that pie chart.
And I will share, I really appreciate your time and explanation, Lynn. I learn something from you every day. But the reason that we look at these financials, and particularly the division financials every month, is because the PHB is the Community Action Program Board for Lane County. And one of the many requirements of being a Community Action Board is that the board needs to look at the financials. Many community action boards are actually nonprofit boards. And so they then would take the extra step of approving the financials and maybe digging more deeply, particularly through like finance committees. For us, because it's a part of a public entity, Lane County, this board doesn't have to dig deeply. You simply need to see it. And of course, we want to make it accessible to you and as simple as possible. But you don't necessarily need to dig in and understand it or approve it because the commissioners, of course, do that.
But if I will put an addendum on that, this board is advisory and powerfully advisory to the Board of Commissioners. So if you do dig deeper, and if there's any area this board looks at in the future in a deeper fashion, and thanks to Mayor Vinnis for asking Kate to provide a clearer focus on it, and thanks Kate for providing it, this board is pertinent in that it provides policy advice on what is in this pie chart regarding community action. And as you've seen today, what this board asks for, people will hear. And you know, you can ask for things and expect to get the things that you ask for.
Chair, Vice Chair.
So, sorry, I need you to clarify a little bit more on this pie chart. So this $21 million, that is money that comes from where? And that is all distributed out into the community, or is some of that funding covering county staff who are doing these types of activities too?
So it is funding the majority through contracts to nonprofits. The only programs that are included are our rural outreach program and coordinated entry, and that those are direct service programs. And so it doesn't include, like, for example, my salary. It would just be the contracted programs.
And is this the continuum of care funding, or is this?
It includes the continuum of care funding. You know, we have over 25 different funding sources from the federal, state, and local level.
Any other follow-up questions regarding those financials? I guess.
And it doesn't, I have been puzzled by the small percentage on the permanent.
Recording in progress.
Just wondering, so Homes for Good, that kind of expenditure, is that included in this?
It is not, unless the county, so for example, we provide prevention assistance funding to Homes for Good, but if, you know, a Homes for Good affordable housing complex would not be included in that because they have other dollars.
And I can illuminate that just a little bit. The Homes for Good board met yesterday as separate from the Board of County Commissioners. It used to be the Board of County Commissioners plus 2 residents. Now there are only 2 county commissioners on that board, and the balance of it is residents and other members of the community. And they have a budget a lot bigger than this green pie here that they do work with, because they have a lot of capital facilities and lots and lots of front doors that people live behind.
Yeah, so not necessarily related to the Poverty and Homelessness Board, but in the same vein of providing some transparency and just a clear understanding of the community overall, where that funding is going and coming and how much we're spending in each of these areas. We are working towards a kind of sources and uses analysis. The Chamber, City of Eugene and Springfield, Lane County are working with Echo Northwest, hopefully starting in January, to sort of analyze all of these, but then bring in where are these nonprofits getting that funding from, so we can actually see a better picture of how much does our community spend on permanent supportive housing? Irregardless of who's putting that money in the bucket, like how much are we spending? What's the gap? What do we need, et cetera? Because I feel like each of these different entities have their own complicated budgets. And the general public has a really hard time understanding as a holistic picture, how much are we spending on shelter? How much are we spending on emergency services? How much are we spending on permanent supportive housing as a community or a region? So I'm excited that all these bodies are kind of coming together to say, like, yeah, let's create just a clear, simpler picture for the broader community to understand that a little bit better. So.
And thank you for that. And I would just add for that it is relevant to this board where there are gaps. And are we, what's our, you know, are we over investing in one part of this pie or one part then and under investing somewhere else as we look forward on strategic planning for this body, among other things. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
If I may, Mervyn, it's the strategic nature of the makeup of this board makes it very well equipped to provide that kind of input to whether it be the Board of County Commissioners, whether it be the City of Eugene or whomever. The Board of County Commissioners is the only actual legal charge that you have direct input with, but your reach goes far beyond that.
Great. Just want to let you know we have a hand raised.
From a member?
Jacob Bott.
Jacob?
Thanks, Chris. I just want to appreciate Lynn and Kate and the rest of the team. You know, this board's been approving these budgets for quite a while, and I just appreciate, one, the transparency, but two, the deep dive. I'd also give a shout out to Brittany and the chamber for, working with Echo Northwest and the city, the county, and Homes for Good, or the cities, the county and Homes for Good, on just getting a clear picture and being able to communicate, to this board and the public more broadly, the investments we're making, the outcomes we're achieving, and where we can do better. So I just want to respect and appreciate the work.
Thank you, Jacob. Are there any other questions on the financials before we move forward? We do have Mayor Van Gordon ready with Neil to do the item. Just want to get a quick head nods if we could. We're going to skip committee reports and follow up with that with a written response from the committees, so that way we can take care of these relevant time-sensitive things.
Pardon a quick interjection, Chair. I'm not sure if everybody knows that Jacob Fox, who just spoke, is the Executive Director of Homes for Good.
Thank you for that clarity. Mayor Van Gordon.
Thank you. Neil Ladati, the Assistant City Manager, was kind enough to hop on short notice. I texted him as soon as I got here, knowing that there were questions. And really what I wanted to do is maybe give him a chance to give us the update of what the last maybe 24 hours have been like. And then if more folks have additional questions, then we can sort of field those questions about the guest house before we move on. And thanks, Chris, for letting us sort of hijack the agenda here, because I know that there's other items.
Neil.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Van Gordon, and thank you, Chair McAllister. I can provide a brief update, and then whatever questions I can answer, I'm very happy to do that. So if you're familiar with the property in question, it's the Guest House Inn and Suites at 3350 Gateway Street. It's been a location that has been very busy with police calls and activity over the last year, but specifically over the last few months. I think 50 calls within the last 30 days to the site for Springfield PD. So basically what has happened at the site is the property was abandoned by the on-site hotel management company, which was Alley Hospitality, and that happened in November of 22. The current property owner does not have control over the property, and so it has been turned over to a real estate receiver, which is court appointed, and that person landed in town yesterday and is at the site. They're working on providing some security for the site as well. What was sent to our organization was, with the calls for service, were some concerns that were called in that led us to actually do a review and visit to the site. And what we found there was fire alarm monitoring system had been non-operational. Fire separation walls and doors had been damaged and were no longer functioning. Exits and exit pathways were blocked and obstructed. There were multiple guest doors found to be screwed shut by the occupants, and most of the hardware was missing. We found live electrical wiring hanging from many sections of the ceiling, many sections of the ceiling assemblies just missing, heavy concentrations of mold, and what was very concerning to us, raw sewage found within the facility. And so that led to the fire marshal seeing the conditions, observing the conditions, and knowing that they posed an imminent threat, and closing the building. And that occupancy to close was noticed earlier this week, December 13th. And since then, we've done a 24-hour fire watch, which includes fire and police at the facility 24/7 to make sure there was no fires while there were folks still in there. Over the last 24 hours, we've worked with a lot of community partners, including specifically with Chair McAllister, who was on site for several hours last night, and we talked on the phone several times, and partners at HIV Alliance responding to find transport and temporary locations for the folks that were living there. It's a really unfortunate situation, made more unfortunate that there were some families trying their best to live at the site. Again, no management on the site for a month. And then there were a number of folks that should not have been in the building that were squatting in the building or just trying to find a space. And so the activity that was happening was causing a lot of calls for police services. The receiver is on site now. The building is secure. I think folks have some concerns about their materials that are left in the room, that were left maybe in their rooms. I think the rooms are probably more secure now than they have been. It's going to be challenging work to get people back in to get their stuff, but that's something that the receiver will need to work through. I don't have all the legal, I can't give you all the legal specifications off the top of my head, but I can tell you that, they'll need to work with the folks staying at the location moving forward to find locations for them to stay. I think what the city was able to do, again, with our partners, was just find some immediate, the next week, maybe the next 2 weeks, places for folks to stay as this is an emerging situation. So that's a brief update. But what I can tell you is when we went in and saw the fire and health code violations, it was not something we could unsee. It's the last thing we want to do is actually move people out in any kind of weather, let alone when it's cold. But those are the difficult decisions that had to be made. And I'm happy to answer any questions that I can.
Yeah, Neil, can I just have a clarifying question? What we heard from a couple of the folks testifying was that there was an original day and time that individuals in the building were given, and then it was sped up a couple days saying, no, it has to be by the end of today. I'm just curious, and maybe I just missed you saying it, the changing in that timing that was given to the residents, or if that, maybe there's just some misunderstanding of what that looked like.
That's a great question. And I think what often happens is, there's a lot of discussions. And again, no one was in charge of the facility. They had no management company. So the doors were padlocked and people were living in the facility with no main point of contact. So I think there's a difference between, hey, we'd like to start moving people out versus, hey, we've done an inspection and we see things that are unsafe, and we need to get people out of the building. There's an imminent danger. So I think often you can say, hey, we'd like to move over the next week or so folks out of this building. And then you find an imminent danger and you must move them. And I think that's what we found ourselves in, that situation we found ourselves in on the 13th.
Thanks.
I would just like to say two things. We did invoke on the ground ORS 203.077-082, which is the Humane Camp and Cleanup Policy that was modified more recently this January to be able to ask more than the one 3-hour block window today between 10 and 1 to get all of your stuff. We've asked for at least another 1 or 2 options that can be scheduled with the people as families left their birth certificates, they left stuff all behind, and some people who went out to go get gas for the vehicle were not allowed to go back into their rooms. And so I also would like to say, in terms of the confusion, we were told that we had 43 hours to help people, and then it was changed at noon yesterday till by 6:30 p.m. And so we understand that there was some eminent domain, but there was also some confusion on the ground with who was enforcing which code. And so I do want to thank the city of Springfield for rising and helping provide a quicker access. Some of the providers were kept to 12 rooms at a time being secured because of our system. You have to have so many people with IDs, you have to have so many cards per purchase, so many rooms secured at one time. I think that as we move forward, one of the things that we can look at is how can we do a bulk public health or emergency action securing of hotels, and if we can maybe utilize things like our HMIS IDs to be able to get people into hotels, because we had 3 people rejected, including 2 people with kids. And so we wanted to make sure, and Neil personally helped us find a place for that family. Yes, Rosie?
When situations like this arises, what's the crisis prevention program that is in place, that is in the agency that is responsible for this evacuation? Exactly what is the crisis program that they have that they go by implementing this during the evacuation?
I think that maybe that would ultimately determine who's making the call. If the fire marshal did, I think that that might be under an ICS, incident command structure, as a lot of our emergency responses. I know Carrot Ford does the ICS. I'm pretty sure that that's part of that, but it's about who is the direct person and the highest clearance. And so if it's not on the county level, then it's at the state level. If it's not at the state level, it's a federal. depending on what someone's invoking, would also possibly determine which direction. I'd like to follow up with staff to figure out and answer your question directly.
And the thing is because if we don't educate our community, even though they're unhoused community, how are they going to understand a process they're not familiar with? That's the key thing. We need to start educating our community.
Thank you, Rosie.
Just a quick question that you may know the answer to, Chair. Does the fire marshal have superseding authority over all other authorities in the all of the jurisdictions? I mean, can the fire marshal say evacuate now, and it's your job to do it?
Yes, sir. I do believe that if it's invoked under certain public health or emergency clauses, that they have the superseding authority. And we have a joint fire district here in Springfield, Eugene. And so we get better response times, but it also means that sometimes there might be more people to coordinate and bring into it, from my understanding. When we have a receivership on the ground too, so someone who's third party appointed by the court, that also makes it a little bit clear because their interest is not protecting the clients as much as it is protecting the property. So we as human services, we as public health have to look in and figure where those goals are and where it happens. We did so with the fires, we did so with COVID. Homelessness is the next emergency we're trying to tackle head on.
Not to belabor the point, but I guess, again, I don't know that the Poverty and Homelessness Board has any authority over the situation, right? And I think that that's, appreciate the public comment, and we want to be good stewards of those public comments to the folks who have the authority. But it does feel like there might be a role. I see the Poverty and Homelessness Board as the body who's bringing together the private sector, the service providers, the government partners, and it feels like post-action, after we figure out the actual trauma that we're having in the crisis, there's an opportunity to say, how do we make sure that HIV Alliance hasn't lost trust in our government partners to then be a response mechanism if we have another crisis? And I think that's a role that this board or this body, individuals here can help have those conversations. Because I know we all got to stay in our lane, and I appreciate you, Neil, giving us kind of the perspective from the government, because there's always multiple sides of the conversation, and there's always things that not everybody gets every piece of information. But as far as what we can do walking away, it feels like there's an opportunity there, because otherwise, if there's another crisis, we need folks like HIV Alliance and Carry It Forward to show up and not feel like they're being thrown to the wolves. So.
And, you know, this is an opportunity for me to say there is no other board like this. There is no other board that convenes multiple jurisdictions, plus the business community, plus the public, plus the nonprofit community, and the state and other agencies. The sheriff is here. The head of the CEO of Homes for Good is here. So there's no other board ever that I've witnessed that's been like this. That's what makes this, as you say, Coach Quick-Warner, we have an opportunity to look at it after the action and make recommendations as to what can be done to recommend to the multiple jurisdictions and to the business community to work more in concert for the future. So once again, what a remarkable time that we would meet together for the first in-person meeting in 2 years, that such a rich topic of discussion is in front of us.
Oh, I just really appreciate the comments and really lifting up the fact that the emergency procedures in the event of, you know, a condemnation of a motel or an earthquake or a flood, et cetera, continues to present itself more and more, particularly in the last few years. And I had the pleasure of being able to go to a preparatory institute for FEMA emergency management out in Maryland about a month ago. And it was sobering to me what could occur and the level of coordination and partnership and dollars that would be needed to really support our community members well. And what I walked away with was very much a renewed interest in planning and really thinking about how do we set aside some dollars and, more importantly, community agency capacity to be able to address these emergent needs that are becoming more and more common. And so I share this just to say I hear you, and I very much look forward to working with our executive committee to talk more about these needs and how we can create additional collaborations and strengthen those collaborations moving forward so that we're better prepared as these emergencies continue to increase.
Sheila and then Mayor Van Gordon.
Thank you. This goes along with what Kate was saying, and I wonder if there's an opportunity for us to invite emergency management. I know Patience Wiggum with the county has brought together all the emergency managers from across the county, and then when we had the fires that were happening in the summer, there was a very quick response to that, and we all came together and were able to stand something up. While not perfect, I believe some of that work's been done, and I wonder if these types of situations would fall under that type of emergency management.
Thank you. Mayor Van Gordon.
Yeah, so first of all, really appreciate you, Neil, hopping on a short notice. I think one of the things this sends a powerful message about is the importance of funding discretionary programs like hotel vouchers, right? When you hear the story of how we react to these emergencies, a lot of times we rely on that, on that bucket of funds to sort of get people through the night and then figure it out in the morning. And I think it's important to acknowledge the amount of nonprofit providers, right, that come into play, because the city governments couldn't do it, and the county government can't do it without its nonprofit providers. I think there's also two really distinct and kind of things to sort of think through here. One of them is when it comes to governmental organizations, one of the things that I think is sort of really important is that we got kind of have to trust the staffs to run with the emergency piece of it, right? And then use our role as an advisory board to pull back from there, because I just want to recognize there's really a distinction between, hey, what are all the questions when the fire marshal says somebody's going to it's unsafe and uninhabitable, and then, okay, well, how do we do this better in the future? I think those are two sort of separate questions, and I would just sort of advise or caution people to go, okay, as we sort of talk through some of this and how do we do it better, right, that we really have to trust our staffs to kind of look at it and go, if the fire marshal says it's uninhabitable, then okay, what do we do? And these problems, sometimes they don't accelerate. Sometimes they do accelerate as far as how you have to address them. And then it's up to us to sort of pull back and go, okay, does everybody have the resources? Are we getting the information to the different organizations the way we should? How do we do it better? And then lastly, I really can't emphasize enough, right, the importance of, right, a lot of big issues get sort of solved, and they get quietly solved and worked out from a timing perspective. This one by leaps and bounds really is on the extreme end of challenges, right? And so I think it's really incumbent on us to sort of talk through, make sure everybody's got every tool in their toolbox, but really think through, okay, how do we support and make sure that the resources are there so that people can address these when they come up.
Thank you, Mayor. And I thank everybody for putting time on this topic. As the county does have purview over public health and a lot of human services efforts, and as a lot of the jurisdictions have asked the county to help support in that, I hope that as we learn in Springfield, in Eugene, in Veneta, Cottage Grove, and all the other 9 cities of Lincoln County, that we work with that and we support our county supports, but we also ask and hold them. And I also like us to maybe learn how we can help inform our police and our firefighters about how to better engage in these types of situations. So that way our people can trust them when they are in emergencies. So I yield on this topic, and I'd like to invite Ms. Kate Budd to bring up item number 7.
So thank you, members, for being a part of the nomination process for the executive committee. The nomination opportunity was open for about a month, where members were invited to either nominate themselves or a PHB member to be chair, vice chair of community action, or vice chair of homelessness. And so the nominations that we received created a slate of Brittany Quick Warner as chair, Pat Farr as vice chair of community action, and Chris McAllister as vice chair of homelessness. And so that is the result of the nomination process. If there's any discussion and an opportunity to vote.
And I'd like to also bring up, this does bring up the question about whether we have one vice chair or two vice chairs. And so if we are in agreement with us continue on in that, not prohibited by charter, but not encapsulated in our charter, if we want to continue on with that with two chairs, two vice chairs and a chair, then I'd like to make the question.
Thank you, Chair. I checked with the county council this morning regarding the two chair. We've been operating with two chairs for a year now, and there's really only one change that needs to be made to the charter. He is firmly of the opinion that we are inside of the charter capabilities or practicalities, but he suggests that in section E1A says a chair and vice chair will be elected by a majority. If the parentheses S after vice chair we put on there, we'll just cover that just without a simple change.
May I invite Catherine Ryan, who had raised the concern originally, to share if that meets concerns or if there's any other considerations?
Yeah, sorry, pulling it up to try and take a look. And I think I don't necessarily have thoughts either way. I just am sometimes a rule follower, and so wanted to make sure that other folk, just kind of everyone was square on what it did say in the charter and where we were. Which, Commissioner, I'm trying to look through it and can you tell me which section it's in again?
I can, hang on a second. It is in, it's on what is actually page 4 of the charter itself, and it's section E, PHB board leadership. Is under section 2 in the first Roman numeral 2. Section E is PHB chair board leadership. The first paragraph, 1, a chair and vice chair will be elected by majority. And so the simple fix there would be to change vice chair to parentheses S, which could mean one chair or more than one vice chair or more than one vice chair.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes sense. I think the only other thing in looking at it is that currently it says executive committee shall consist of up to 7 members. I don't think we've had that many of kind of those other spots that are identified in there. But I don't know if we would also want to actually, if all of the spots, so it says chair, currently it says chair, vice chair, 3 elected officials, 2 low-income representatives, and 2 community members, which would be 9 people if all of those were there. So I don't know if we want to adjust the number also if we're going to be making changes.
How do we feel? Head nods? We open to entertaining a motion.
Involved in the so I move to approve the slate of candidates for chair and vice chair and make the amendments to our charter regarding adding an S to the section regarding vice chair, and then also including an increase in the number of executive committee members up to 9.
That was impressive. Good work.
Yes. Can we get a second?
I second.
So we got a second and a motion. All in favor, please signify by, discussion. Discussion, yes, Chief or Sheriff.
Pardon me. I just wanted to confirm that 2 things. One, that we have the authority to adjust the charter on the fly today. And assuming that we did with a quorum have the authority, would we want to send that proposed charter amendment out to members who weren't here today before we actually took the vote to amend the charter? I'm in support of the change and I'm in support of the slate, but I just, for process, thought I'd raise that.
Very valid, Sheriff. Thank you for that. Would you like to?
I appreciate your point, Sheriff. I do not have the bylaws in front of me, but what I can pledge to do is I'll take an in-depth look. And if it is not within our power to do this, as you mentioned, on the fly, then we can come back at the next meeting and do it officially and align with the bylaws.
Hey, Kate, I do, just because I have it pulled up, it does say amendment to charter, written notice of such proposed amendment and the nature of shall be given to membership at least 10 days prior to the date of the meeting at which the amendments are to be considered.
I will go forth with making those
You are
written
also impressive,
changes.
Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine.
And Catherine, a shout out to the rule followers. I'm a big fan of rule followers.
Sometimes it's not good, but sometimes it's helpful.
Thank you, Sheriff. And this does also show up that we are in agreement, and so it allows us to have that framework. And so I'm happy to do this. I know that we needed to have our elections done before the end of the year, and so there were several time things. And so we did make the amendment in a meeting as such, and so I would like to formalize it through the process as it is. And so I will ask staff to give direction if there's anything else to do with that.
So process-wise, are we holding the vote for the chairs until the next meeting as well?
No, let's if someone's willing to. Thank you, Susan.
I will modify my motion
Fair enough.
to approve the slate of electors for our executive committee, and then wait for it.
Thank you, Susan. The motion has been amended. Is there a second on the amendment? Okay. Cheers. And Rosie and so we have a lot of seconds. Is there any further discussion? Anybody online? Hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, signify by saying nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Slate, and thank you, Board, for working on this item.
And I just want to thank you all for serving in those leadership roles. Appreciate it.
So I'd like to bring up number 8 with Brianna.
Yes, hi, thank you. Brianna Rogers, Program Services Coordinator, focusing on community action, poverty and homelessness prevention. So we had a number of candidates who, first of all, want to send our appreciation to for applying for these seats, and thank you for your hard work and dedication and advocacy for this community. So we had an ad hoc committee who was assembled, who consisted of 3 PhD members, who reviewed applications and conducted virtual interviews of candidates. So we, as the ad hoc, have voted to recommend the following PhD membership positions, which would be Chris McAllister for the lived experience seat, Rosie Marquez for the from St. Vincent de Paul for the faith-based organization seat, and then Terry Shea from HIV Alliance for the direct service seat. So sorry. Do I need to say it again?
So, thank you, Brianna. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about this process before we do the action item?
I just thank everyone, not only the candidates, but also those who, the ad hoc committee.
Thank you, everybody, for doing this work. I'd like to ask for a motion.
Oh, right. Can I get a motion for this action item? Is there a second?
The motion. Second.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Excellent. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. And this is an awesome board and an awesome process. Let's move on quickly, please, to number 9, Carly Walker on the point in time count.
Just so you know, I am watching the chat, and everyone's just saying they have to pay for another meeting. It's all good. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Hi to some of you that I know well and maybe haven't met in person before. I'm the HMIS supervisor, and formerly I was the trainer, so I know lots of our agency folks really well. And just wanted to talk a little bit about our plans for the point in time count. This is a count that we have to conduct at least every other year, but that we choose to do each year. What it is one night, one point in time, what's a snapshot of in our community who is literally homeless. And so in the past, there's a variety of ways we have done it. The traditional way is to just ask volunteers to go out into the community, encounter who they find, and survey them. This usually results in a really severe undercount of folks. In the last few years, we've sort of transitioned that model. When I submitted this information for the packet, it hadn't been approved, but HUD recently said, absolutely, this works for us and go forth. I just want to give you some details on what that means. We're really fortunate in our community that the homelessness management information system, that H really doesn't just stand for homelessness for us, because we use our system for all of these community action programs as well. So unlike other communities, actually our HMIS is a very, very good count of who is in our community, not just who's homeless, but at risk of homelessness and in those low income and and poverty situations. And because we have so many amazing providers putting in information every day, we actually have a pretty close count of who is in our community, and much better than we would if we just did a traditional survey. So what I suggested to HUD was that we do the same thing we've done the past 2 years, which is to use some information from our HMIS as the primary source for the count. There's some detail on that report logic if you're interested in the packet. Of course, not everyone is willing to participate in HMIS. They also might not be willing to participate in a survey. So I'm never going to claim we'll get a perfect count, but the suggestion is that the day of the point in time count, we're going to coordinate outreach workers to go across the county, try to find those individuals that wouldn't normally be counted in HMIS and give them the opportunity to be surveyed and included in the count. So through those surveys, we'll see for each of those individuals, were they already on our by name list in our HMIS? And if not, we'll include them to just get a more accurate count that way. HUD didn't have any concerns. They said, this sounds great, keep going. We're really lucky that our HMIS is so comprehensive because it does give us much better information than we would otherwise. And of course, we're going to put as much effort as we can into that survey portion. So that's the proposition, and I'd love to take any questions you have.
Are there any quick questions for Harley?
I'm checking the chat too.
I just want to say, as someone who's participated since 2016 in every version we do, and since we do every year, including ones we don't have to, that it helps build robust. And so I want to thank Amanda Borda, Lisa Stewart, Carly Walker, Alex Dreer, Maria Cortez, James Ewell, Catherine Ryan. These are the people who have kept it going as the staff, and the leadership such as Kate Budd and Steve Manila also help drive it too. And so as we continue to refine this and define it, it helps put a face to our population entirely. And even when we find out we miss people, it gives us the opportunity to go back. Because of point in time count, I learned that we have Creole speakers in Oak Ridge. And so these are the types of things that we learned from the data. So thank you very much. Let's see, can we entertain a motion to approve the methodology?
I move to approve the methodology.
Second. We got a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Signify by saying nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have number 10, Kirsten London.
That's me today.
Oh, AKA Brianna.
Filling in for Kirsten today. Everyone, if I'm good with that. So because I'm filling, I'm going to mostly read this. So currently, Lane County Coordinated Entry Referral, the Lane County Coordinated Entry Referral process for rapid rehousing project is as follows. First, households with a VI SPDAT score of 4 to 7 are considered best served for rapid rehousing. And then from that list, chronically homeless households with the highest SPDAT score in that range are prioritized for referrals to rapid rehousing projects. And then the proposal, following the current Lane County Coordinated Entry process for rapid rehousing referrals for the new joint transitional housing rapid rehousing youth project will be prioritized in the following order. First, youth ages 16 to 24 on the rapid rehousing list with the highest VI SPDAT scores from 4 to 7 who are chronically homeless, and then youth ages 16 to 24 on the list with the highest VI SPDAT scores who are literally homeless. That's the new proposal. And then that's what we'll be voting on. So from that, we will also continue to work with the Youth Executive Committee and the Coordinated Entry Work Group to assess how the changes are working and adjust the process as needed.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this hard work, Kirsten via Brianna. Are there any questions for Brianna before we take this vote?
Just add in, as chair of the Youth Homeless Solutions Work Group, we didn't get a chance to give our plug this morning, which we'll send an email update later. But I would also like to kind of highlight through this the importance of the Youth Executive Committee, and that we have been working to solicit more youth to be involved in that process. And so we really look for any connections within this board to help us fill out a little bit more.
I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the adjusted methodology and process regarding the referral prioritization.
I so move.
Moved, second? seconded by Matthias. All in favor, or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you so much. Next, I would like to invite Amanda Borda to briefly talk about, actually, point of order. We did have a little bit of extended time with our public comment and interfacing with the city of Springfield. Can we extend this meeting by 5 minutes to be able to cover the 2 remaining items? Okay, seeing head nods, thank you. Yes, ma'am, fair enough. So I'd like to invite Amanda, it's approximately 5 to 10 minutes.
Sure. I'll go very quickly. Amanda Borda, Senior Program Services Coordinator with Lane County. So I brought this to the PHB Executive Committee at the last session, and so I'm just following up on that initial conversation. So I won't get into too much detail today, but you do have a item in your packet that summarizes sort of what I have already presented. So I don't want to go through that. I have added to that some frequently asked questions that came up at the previous meeting to hopefully clarify some questions and discussion that has already been had around this topic. So what we're looking to do is potentially look at switching to a unified funding agency model for our continuum of care. And that's just a different distinction that we can apply under HUD when the next competition comes up. Currently, we apply as a collaborative applicant. So we have sort of started to review this, and we wanted to bring it to the board for a review of whether this makes sense for our community. I think where we're at right now is I've talked with our co-applicants, St. Vincent de Paul and Homes for Good. I've sort of made a note of their concerns and their support areas as well. There are some areas where it would be sort of a deal breaker or things that we have to address. And so my recommendation at this point is to not move forward with this at the upcoming competition in early 2023, but sort of postpone that to 2024 and spend the next year within this board, and perhaps that can be through a designated sort of task group of 2 to 3 members maybe, who can sort of dive in, address it, or see if this makes sense or if it doesn't make sense and make a recommendation back to the board. So that's what I'm recommending for this group, just to sort of take a look at over the next year, see if it makes sense, and then figure out in 2024 if it works.
Thank you for that report out, Amanda. May I ask a couple of questions just for, you said early 2023. If we found another reason to go with a different pathway, what would that deadline be?
Sure. So this is something that has to occur during our COC registration process, which is released in January and is due in March. But in order to sort of make sure that happens, we would need to know pretty quickly so that when it is released in January, we're sort of ready to go to, there's a bunch of documentation and other things we have to submit. So we couldn't sort of spend that time deciding. We would sort of need to know on the Lane County end how we're moving forward by January. So that's, again, a reason I think we need more time to talk
Totally
about
fair.
it.
Yeah, I was going to say I support waiting till 24 for the reasons you mentioned, but then also because I know right now we have the county is working with the contractor to look both at the Human Services Commission, the Poverty and Homelessness Board, the charters, all of the kind of authority and work and what's the purpose of both of these bodies. And this seems like a core function that should not go first before that work is done. So I think timing wise, it feels better for a couple of reasons to just wait till 24.
Totally agree. Do we have head nods on doing this? Awesome. Thank you so much for your advice and the hard work that it took to not only identify what this is, but also explain it so that our entire community can understand. So thank you. I'd like to please invite Maria Cortez on cold weather response.
Hello, everyone. I'm Maria Cortez, and I'm a Program Service Coordinator with Lane County Human Services Division. And I'm excited to talk to you all a little bit about what we've been doing for cold weather response this year. We have organized a group, the Coordinated Community Severe Weather Collaborative, and have had a couple of meetings thus far this winter with over 30 provider and community-based organizations represented. And the goal of this group really is to look at existing resources in our community and how we can better coordinate and better just really communicate about what we do have and how to put those to best use. So obviously having government represented and the nonprofits and really any other grassroots organizations that are interested in coming to the table and sharing information. So I say I'm excited to talk to you about it because, as we all know, resources are not finite. So we don't always have funding to fund all of the programs that we want to see funding. We don't necessarily have shelter for every unhoused person in the county, as we all know. And so really looking to capitalize and maximize the resources that do exist. So some of the things that we have done, we've created a cold weather resource document, just coming together, sharing all of the information that collectively we have to share in regard to specific cold weather response resources. We've also had warming shelters, both rural and with the Egan Warming Centers, come forward and talk about the resources that exist in various communities such as Cottage Grove, Florence, Oak Ridge, Veneta. One of the, I think, most exciting pieces of this group thus far has been the Operation Cold Weather Survival Stockpile, which has been really a community effort. So a partnership between First Christian Church, Lane County government, as well as Cahoots, and also accessible by multiple providers in the community who are interfacing directly with unhoused folks who are in need of survival supplies. And we had a drive back at the end of November, and through that drive collected roughly 3,000 supplies from community members who care and want to do something about the need. And so that is one of the really exciting things that has not ended. We've continued to push to collect donations. There's been communication with media. There's been just an overall effort to bring supplies to the stockpile, and a number of providers have come and accessed those supplies, and those are getting out directly to people who need them. Another example of the collaborative group and how we've exchanged information to really maximize resources is Food for Lane County actually had a stockpile of blankets that I didn't know about. And we've been able to coordinate to get those blankets over to First Christian Church to add to the stockpile and help get those out directly to the people who need it the most. So that's a summary of what we've been working on. And I think that what's promising about it is the more we collaborate, the more we know what everybody else is doing and what we all have access to, the better we can coordinate as a community around situations that arise. And yes.
Thank you, Maria, for this presentation. May I ask, what would you say the 3 unmet needs are that you've heard throughout this process?
3 unmet needs. So I think, well, I would just say that I think that I've heard from providers that the stockpile is something that is filling an unmet need. So with the need to get survival supplies out to individuals, given that there is not enough shelter for everybody, and there is a need, and not everybody wants to or can access shelter. So having the ability to get those resources out would be one need. Certainly there is an ongoing need for shelter access, and that's something that we're all continuing to work on and work toward. I think that this is another opportunity to get input from the community on how to further address those needs. And so I think that's what I would say.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this. Are there questions?
Thank you, Chair. Maria, the cold weather document, that you refer to, is that available on Lane County's website at this point in time, or is it soon to come?
It's not, but that's a great idea. We could certainly, I'm pretty sure we could make that available, so I will look into that after this meeting.
Yeah, there's a subheading that is emergency cold weather shelter right right under the homeless shelters in Lane County. Yeah, great idea. Thank you.
And I would just say that we do have, we will probably, if it's not already up, will be later today, a document going up with warming locations throughout Lane County. So both daytime and overnight options.
Thank you. And I suspect that the resources document is a dynamic document that it changes as more becomes available.
Absolutely. We've been collecting information from providers as they are sharing it. And so, yes, it's a living document, and it's mainly geared toward other providers, but there's certainly information that the broader community could access.
Thank you, Maria. I would like to just share that as another provider recently shared, there's an unprecedented amount of seniors, single seniors being evicted from their apartments and from their shelters and from their families, and also with some of the nursing homes closed, we don't have as many options for people with higher needs. And so all of this work really matters. And so thank you for helping the general community and also helping troubleshoot with these things. As winter is about to kick into one of the coldest weeks we've had this year, we really need to be mindful of all this. And I'm very appreciative for Maria's hard work on organizing all these resources. So we are almost at time. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. I'd like to raise awareness that we have our next general meeting on January 20th, our executive meeting on January 20th. We have February 17th, we have our all members meeting. I'd also like to recognize that December 21st is Homeless Persons Memorial Day. We've lost so many over the years, and every loss is another opportunity to remember that we are a community and that we need to step up our collective action. And this body is representative of that, and the work of our outreach people who are serving in the field and our case managers who help make the big picture stuff is vital to that. So as we remember our unhoused, let's also remember to support our workers.
And I just wanted to chime in with a round of applause for Chris, and thanks for an amazing job as chair.
And finally, we have the community, City of Eugene Human Rights Commission event, Eugene West Park Block from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. For that December 21st memorial. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
And to echo Brittany's sentiments, we have an award of recognition for Mr. Chris McAllister, signed by our county commissioners for your dedication as chair for the Poverty and Homelessness Board. So thank you very much. We're really appreciative of your time and energy and expertise, and are glad that you'll be able to stay on the executive committee.
Yes, thank you for reporting. And thank you also, Rosie and Terry and Chris, for applying for the seats to keep moving this forward. So thanks.
As opposed to, could I ask a couple of people to help to stay behind and help Diane?